Well, hey, Matt, welcome back. Looking forward to digging in a little bit today on a topic that I know is near and dear to your heart, and that's where do we spend our time? Do we like to spend our time with people inside the organization that are happy to meet with us, but only empowered to say no? Or are we willing to be brave and work our way up the organization, through the organization, to those that are empowered to say yes? So, what do you think, Matt? Is that a good topic for us to tackle today?
I think it's a great one.
All right. So, too often Matt and I get to work with folks who, they're finding themselves in stalled sales cycles or stalled encounters with prospects. And when we dig in more and more about who they're spending their time with and where they are inside the organization, we find that they're spending their time with people that are only empowered to say no. These are not people that own budget. These are not people that are empowered to say, yes, we're ready to move forward. Here's our scope of work. Here's our plan. They're working with people that are only empowered to say, no, I'm going to stop you right here. And the reason people get comfortable, the reason salespeople get comfortable spending their time there is because often those people are willing to take meetings. They feel empowered. They feel like they have authority. They feel like they're in control, and they want to hold on to that control as long as they can before they introduce you to the VP or the person inside the organization that has the budget, has the problem, and has the authority to say yes. So we want to ask ourselves some questions today about, like, why am I spending my time there? Why am I comfortable there? And what do I need to do to start moving forward?
Yeah, and I think from a broader perspective, it's not only where you're spending your time, but are you figuring out the decision making process? And I think there are a lot of salespeople out there. We hear it every single day when whether we're interviewing one or talking through a sales cycle, or assessing sales aptitude for a new or potential client. A question we love to ask is, how do you figure out decision makers, or more importantly, decision making process? And we often hear, well, I just ask them, and they're extremely proud to lay that out. And we dig into, well, have you ever been surprised at the 11th hour, or have you ever had a prospect that said that they had the authority to make the decision, and all of a sudden they go cold? And then finally, after 18 voicemails, they finally say, well, CEO Steve, he came in and we decided to go another direction. But you're going to be my first call next time if we ever go out for this. So I think just stepping back and setting the table with the interacting with no men or women versus yes men or women, I think it plays into the bigger picture of, are we figuring out the decision making process? And mind you, saying decision making process, not decision makers, because we believe in process over people. And it is much more important for us to understand the buying process than just the decision maker. Yes, people fit into the process, and those are important. But we're selling in an environment right now where there's so many gatekeepers, information gatherers, insulators, influencers, you name it, around actual decision makers. And before I throw it back to you, Bill, this is something that I talk about every single day. Let's not assume that people know how to buy. And let's
That's right.
not assume that people know their own buying process. They might know steps. They might know enough to get it to a certain point in the process. But more likely than not, we're doing this every day, and they might not be buying every single day. So yes, men and women, no men and women, important, and we're going to dig into that. But I just wanted to call to attention: are we figuring out the decision making process before we even get to that point?
Right. And as Matt talks about that, Matt, let's role play here together for a minute. Matt talks about how do people find that out. And when we work with salespeople, we find oftentimes they're much more concerned about asking someone. They feel very brave and confident in saying to us, well, I just ask. I'll just ask somebody, are you the decision maker? So Matt, let me put you on the spot. You be my buyer. And Matt and I are working together. And some of the things we hear oftentimes from people is they'll say, so Matt, is this your decision to make?
You better believe it.
Hmm. Let me phrase this a different way. This is another way we hear it sometimes. Hey, Matt, this is a big decision. And when I come back next time, Who else should we have in the room with us for our meeting?
Well, maybe CEO Steve.
Well, can we do that? Can you set that up with him? Are you willing to do that for us and get Steve in the room?
Well, I don't know. Let me see
Mhm.
your price first.
Yeah, right. So that's the way people ask these questions. And what we find that question to be, we call it a hero or zero question. You either have to force, like we did Matt the first time he answered that question, to be the hero and say, absolutely, this is my decision to make. Or we make him feel like a zero when we uncover that we only want to be with Matt if he's the decision maker. If he's not, we want to make sure we have the right people in the room versus Matt. What we care about much more is the process. So, Matt, let's try our little role play again and see how this sounds. Hey, Matt, if this makes sense, and I were to come back next week and show you a price you like, show you the scope of work you like, and we come to an agreement, what happens next? Can you walk me through the process?
Well, I'd most likely take that to procurement to make sure that it checks some boxes, and if it looks good there, legal probably has to get involved.
When was the last time you took something like this to procurement and legal, and how long? What happened, and how long did that take for you?
Well, phew, good question. They're not always the fastest.
hmm So we'll back out of role play, but what we illustrate there and what we see is that when we ask questions about process, we gain true information about how we move forward together with our prospect, right? How we move together as a partner versus imposing our will. So when that is discovered and people start identifying for us who else needs to be in the process, guess what they're identifying for us? The people who have the authority to say yes, not just the people that have the authority to say no. So we need to be mindful of how do we get those people with authority to say yes, those people with the budget, those people with the problem, those people who own the solutions that we're hoping to deliver, the outcomes. How do we get them involved in the process sooner rather than later? Versus waiting to get to the end to be surprised. And that's what Matt talked about earlier is, those 11th hour surprises where we think we're working with somebody who's telling us, yeah, I got you, stay here. And they try to insulate us from the rest of the organization. They keep us close. And then it becomes a problem there later in the process.
hmm Yes, I think, Bill, it's not only identifying, but are we confident enough to ask questions like that? Because there's salespeople out there that don't want to ask that, or don't want to step over that potential landmine because um, they're afraid to. Their deal might not look as good. They might
Mm.
have a couple extra layers to discover in. Why would I want to go and make myself uncomfortable when I'm talking to someone that really likes me? I'm talking to someone where we're hitting it off, that's shaking their head. Yes, they love everything about it. So why would I go negative? And the reason for that is when we leave, they're going to have to go through that process anyway. They're going to think about their decision making process or an internal buying process. So why wouldn't we want to be there to not only figure out the information, but influence it in many ways? We're selling
And
them the
help
real.
them discover things that they might not be thinking of, right? In that process. Because
Yep.
as you said earlier, Matt, we're selling this every day. You're selling your product. How many sales cycles have all of you as salespeople been through where who people get involved? Anytime somebody tells you, oh, we don't need legal, if you have 100 deals in your rearview mirror that say, I've been with legal every time, somebody tells you we don't need legal, challenge that. Say, really? That's going to be a first for me because every other time we've done this, the client's gotten legal involved, right? Or they say, no, we don't need procurement. Really? Because every time we've done this, procurement comes in at the last hour and tells us they need a 20% haircut. Matt loves that. Matt loves surprises at the end of a sales cycle, don't
Yeah, and I always give the discount. No,
you?
I'm teasing. But I think another point here, as we evaluate who we're spending our time with, I think we need to differentiate and at least acknowledge that there's a difference between influence. There's a difference between authority. There's a difference sometimes withholding budget, right? If it's a smaller organization, it might all be the same person, but the individual with authority might be looking for people that influence that are with a product or with a service every day. It's important to them. They listen. We always give the example, if someone comes in and tries to sell Bill something and says, "Well, your name's on the company. It must be you. I'm going to sell top down." How often do you make a decision in a vacuum, Bill, without talking to Ron or myself?
Or the real boss, Susie. Yeah,
Yeah.
never, right? I never make decisions on my own. And I think very few people do. And Matt made the comment about I always give the discount, right? He jokingly said about himself, I always give that discount. Well, guess what we find we have to do at the end of a cycle when a surprise arises and they introduce the real decision maker or the real person carrying the budget or the real person that's saying yes, when we've spent all of our time up to this point with people that are only empowered to say no, guess what happens? They ask us for discounts. And when we're against it and it's the last day of the quarter or the last day of the year, we're much more inclined to say yes to that discount that they request. And when we could have eliminated that by identifying it way up front and getting those people involved in the process much earlier, because it's impossible to sell value to someone that can only say no. It's impossible. We can't sell value to somebody that can only say no. If we have to value sell, and unless you are the cheapest widget in the market, you're value selling. You have to, right? And if we don't get people involved early on who are empowered to say yes because they own the problems, we can't value sell.
Hmm. Hmm. Well, that's interesting. You said that own the problems, because how often, for some of us, are we selling and interacting with individuals that might have a corporate entity above them, or might have people with budget above them, that in certain industries and certain sales cycles you might not ever be able to get to them, right? We
Hmm.
often talk about, selling top down. We believe in it. We love it. If we could walk into CEO and CFO's offices every single day when we're selling a widget or commodity, that would be fantastic. But that's not the case or reality for everybody that we coach. And so, it's an interesting point, because decision makers don't always feel the pain. The decision makers might just be looking at the budget. So for those of us that might not ever be able to reach a decision maker, I'm not saying don't try, but how often are we connecting back that pain? How often are we saying and coaching up, right, through the influencer or through the individual that might be feeling that pain? Simple thing that we were coaching last week that comes to mind for me is that there's a corporate entity above a location, and it was in the cleaning space, and went through a sales cycle. And this is about the fifth or sixth time that they've gone through this cycle. And finally, they broke through by asking the questions of, so what's CEO Steve going to think about this? Well, he goes with the cheapest price. And for the person to say, well, how is this impacting you? It's making my job terrible. It's making my job miserable. We're losing productivity. We're losing time because I'm going around the whole, 18-story office when important people come in. Do you think it's important that CEO Steve knows that? Do you think it's important that he understands how this is impacting productivity and how this is impacting you? Yeah, it is. Have you ever had that conversation? No, we haven't. We've just continually gone into the cycle year after year, and we do all this work and we give him the proposals and he goes with the cheapest price. So, totally agree with you, Bill. Getting the people that own the problem, that own the pain. But for some of us, it's connecting the pain and the problem with maybe somebody that has the purse strings or has the true authority. So it could work both ways there.
Absolutely. And we need to then empower those people we're working with who own the problem but don't own the budget to share the problem with the person that owns the budget. So, I encourage all of you to think about where you spending your time. Are you spending your time with people empowered to only say no, keep you where you are, and block you from achieving your goals and block you from delivering solutions to the organization that are critical and needed? Or are you willing to be brave enough and elevate your game and elevate your messaging to people that own the budget, people that own the challenge, people that own the outcomes, and people that are empowered to say yes, because your time is valuable. The gift you have is important. The solutions you bring to your prospects and your clients are critical for their success, not just yours. So be brave one question at a time, and find yourself by asking great questions like, tell me about the process, walk me through the process. What happens if this is successful? What happens if we are able to help? Get to those answers so that you can get to outcomes that you know you need and you know your clients need. Thank you for your time. As always, it's been great being with you guys. We'll be back next week. Again, between now and then, if you have any topics you'd like us to discuss, any challenges you're going through that you think would be good for us to address here, please email those to us at info@Tellerico Group. That's info@tellericogroup.com. And we'll be happy to address those next time we're together. Thank you for everything. Take care. Have a great week and God bless.